I hope you enjoyed the delightful lunch filled with good food and great conversations. Now, as we gear for the afternoon sessions of Serverless Days Ahmedabad, let me introduce our speaker, Mr. 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐯. This year would not be complete without the presence of our international speaker. Allow me to introduce our international speaker, Mr. 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐯, who traveled here right from Australia to share love for serverless technology. He is Managing Director of Skwashd Services in Australia, with over 2 decades of professional experience in building proactive operations in event-driven IT operations. Let's give a big round of applause to welcome our first international speaker. The stage is yours, Mr. 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐯.
Thanks. I heard you liked my first presentation so much, I'm back for a second one. Today I will be talking to you about proactive ops or event-driven IT operations. But first I want to start with a story. It's the middle of the night, you're fast asleep, and you're woken by this. Okay, no audio. Okay, so the sound is with your phone next to your bed. You roll over and you look at the alarm clock. It's 2:30 in the morning. You pick up your phone, there's messages, there's missed calls, there's no voicemail. You know it's going to be a long evening. Your first thought is this. Your second thought is this. You open up your laptop, you start up Slack, and there's meant to be a sound effect here of the sound of Slack with lots and lots of notifications. There's a Zoom call going. There we go. We did get the sound, thank you. So, on Slack, you see that there's a Zoom call going. You jump on Zoom, no one's got their camera on, no one wants to be there. So, you think about where you can start looking for understanding where the problem is. You have a look at the logs. There's errors. There's a lot of errors. You realise that the logs aren't actually going to help you very much. So you think, let's have a look at what changes have been pushed to production recently. So you take a look at the Git history. And then when you take a closer look, you realise that it's not going to be much help at all. You log into AWS, you have a look at the console, and you find that the single EC2 instance, it's not a great size, it's not tagged, someone forgot to enable proper monitoring on the server. So you're kind of a bit stuck. And so let's pause for a second. And first I want to talk about what I won't be talking about today. So we won't be talking about splitting the monolith. Are there any managers in the room? Yep, okay. So DevOpsing harder is not going to solve your problems. The consultants may have told you DevOpsing harder is a thing. I'm here to tell you it's not. Also, if your Jira workflow looks like this, it's not helping you, but I'm not going to solve it during my session today. We can talk in the hallway afterwards though. Now let's rewind and see how we got into this mess. So the team was delivering features. There's a nice chart there showing the story points. Everyone got excited. But the amount of technical debt delivered was constantly increasing. There was a lot of notifications. It was hard to tell which notifications were real, which ones weren't. Now, this is a normal day for the ops team. They're dealing with the first problem. They're still trying to deal with it. The second problem comes along, and it's just like this over and over again. So let's do a little retro because we're agile, we like doing retros. So if your boss is making you go into the office on a Friday, they have to be buying you donuts. This is in the continue column. I'm not making the rules, I'm just telling you what you have to keep doing. So if you're doing hybrid work, it's going to cost you donuts. People are happier at home. We're going to implement observability because, that might help us understand some of the problems. We're going to stop doing 2 a.m. outages because we learned they're not much fun. Also, if it's your birthday, you get the day off. It's paid, doesn't matter if you're a contractor or an employee, you get the day off. We're going to publish postmortems because when things go wrong, we should allow others to learn from our mistakes. If you're doing safe, please stop. You're not helping anyone. And we're going to start being proactive, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So how are we going to be proactive? So we're going to build a platform, and this platform image was generated by Midjourney. If you look at it closely, it's a bit dodgy in parts. It took me quite a few goes to get the right prompt that will actually give us something that looks this good. The same when you're building your platform, the first couple of iterations aren't going to be perfect, but as long as you keep iterating, you will improve. So we want to please our customers. We want our customers to look like this, 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 this. Did you notice they're all smiling? We want our customers to be happy. So what do we need to do that? Well, we need events. And some events are a really big deal. Some events we probably shouldn't talk about, that Adelaide test. And then there's some things that just happen so often they're not even used anymore. So where do these events come from? Oh, the security nerds in the room, they're like, oh cool, he's going to talk about Splunk. Sorry, I'm not going to talk about Splunk. The Kafka nerds are like, oh cool, data streams, this is what he's going to talk about. Not today, unfortunately. Kafka's not serverless, if you hadn't noticed. And the observability nerds, they're like, oh cool, OTel. OTel is great, but it's not what I'm going to be talking about today either. I'm going to be talking about webhooks and the data that you can get from webhooks. So if you're on GitHub, you can get webhooks. If you're an unwashed open source hippie, you can get them in GitLab too. If you're stuck on Bitbucket, my apologies, but you can also get webhooks. If you're on Jira, webhooks. If you like a better ticketing system than Jira, use Linear and they'll also give you webhooks. Asana, ClickUp, both give you webhook data. ServiceNow, webhooks. Zendesk, you pay them enough, they'll eventually give you webhook data. But yeah, it's frustrating dealing with Zendesk. Help Scout, webhooks, don't have to deal with account managers to get them. Sonatype, JFrog Artifactory, the list goes on and on. I'm not going to bore you with any more, but just know you can get webhook data from almost anywhere. And if you're on AWS, CloudTrail, GuardDuty, Security Hub, and CloudWatch events. All great sources of events if you're on AWS. If you're on a different cloud platform, they will be able to give you loads of useful event data as well. Now, once we've got our events, we need to put them somewhere. And putting them on a bus is really useful. Now, buses are really flexible. They can take you a short distance, like the shortest bus route in Ahmedabad, or they can take you to the beach, or they can take you to an even nicer beach. We've got coral. I might be lucky to get out of this room alive by the end of this talk. So, Amazon Event Bridge. It's a really powerful tool for routing events. And so we will look at how we can use that. And we'll combine it with step functions. And so here's a little example. We've got GitHub over on your left. We've got a Lambda function with function URL that goes into Event Bridge. We've got a rule, and that goes to a step function. And because I love animations, we get to watch it go whee straight across the screen, and that's how our events flow through our system. So when I'm talking about using Lambda functions as part of this, I'm not talking about a Lambda function like this with loads and loads of code. I'm talking about little Lambda functions, small ones like this. Now this one, all it's doing is looking for JIRA ticket references in a string. Now, I've worked on quite a few projects where we've needed to find JIRA ticket references in things. And what most engineers do is Google, find the first result on Stack Overflow, and copy and paste the regex. Every now and again, a developer decides they're going to get a bit creative, and they choose the second one, or the second answer. And then you end up with a situation where it works here, it works there, but this one here just works a bit differently. So we'll create one Lambda function, and we will use it all the time. And that helps ensure consistency. We can write loads of tests to make sure it works properly and all of that. Reuse is great. And with these Lambda functions, we want to have loads and loads of these little Lambda functions that we can reuse over and over again. And now, one thing we want to have our Lambdas interact with a lot is third-party services. And OpenAPI is a great way of specifying your APIs. So you use the OpenAPI spec file, it gives you all the endpoints, so you know exactly what you need to call the endpoints. The problem is you need to write the code that calls all of these endpoints. Now, this is how engineers normally write code, up until recently anyway. It's now 2023, so this is how we write all of our code. I guarantee you, this prompt works perfectly every time. So more seriously, it actually takes a fair bit of effort to create this code. I'm sorry for the people down the back, the text is a bit small. But creating this code actually takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. So what I've come up with is a project called PicoFun, because writing boilerplate, there's very little fun in it. And so what PicoFun will do is take an OpenAPI spec file and give you a Lambda function client for every single endpoint in the spec file and the Terraform to go and deploy it. And it works with the petstore.yaml, which is quite a small example, right up to GitHub that has almost 900 endpoints. It will generate all the code for that. So here's a little example with a JSON file I found on the internet. And what we see here, we run it, it's generated all of our Lambda functions like that very quickly. We go have a look and we can see it's generated all the Lambda functions. It's also given us code for a common Lambda layer. And then it's actually gone and generated all the Terraform for us to be able to deploy this. Now, if we jump back to the Lambda, we can actually see the code. There's not a lot to it because we're trying to keep our Lambdas nice and small and just return the JSON that we get back. So now I'm running Terraform apply. Terraform's going to have to think about things for a minute. And then it's working out what needs to be deployed. And come on, type yes. Come on. There we go. It's great when your presentation follows commands. And so now it's actually going to deploy those Lambda functions. And so we saw there, we had a dozen Lambda functions generated and deployed in just a minute or two. Now, we've got this function actually deployed out. We're just refreshing because reasons. And so now we're actually going to call this Lambda function with a proper payload, and it will return us the user object and the headers. So we'll, in our step functions, which we'll look at shortly, we can see how we can use this data that we actually get back. But we can see the body and the headers are all there. Now I'm calling an invalid endpoint to show that you can actually get the 400 with the response, and it also logs the errors for you. So this is a really powerful way of being able to do integrations. And why would you want to do integrations? We'll talk about that in a second, but when we're deciding what functions we want to build and what workflows we want to build, we should start with the Eisenhower matrix to figure out which ones make the most sense. So the stuff that is urgent and important is what we should be working on first. They are the high value things. What are the things that are causing your production outages that you can use data for to prevent those things from happening with automated remediations or alerts or whatever? Figure those things out, do them first. The things that are not urgent, they can wait until later. The team can come along and work on those. The things that are urgent but not important for your team, but they are important for other internal teams, if you build your platform properly, those other teams can come along and work on those things, or as Eisenhower likes to call them, delegate it. So you can actually delegate the building of some of these flows back to the customers within your organization or your users who actually want to have those flows and manage them. And then eliminate. If this doesn't matter if we're talking about proactive ops or anything else. If the ticket is not important and it's not urgent, eliminate it. Close the ticket. Go into Jira, close, reject, whatever it is. Use that option in your workflow. Don't give your customers or your users false hope. Like, how many of you have gone through Jira and found a 3-year-old ticket that every 6 months someone's posting a comment, have you had a chance to work on this yet? That person is still waiting for you to actually implement that thing. Just close it. If it is actually urgent or important, after 3 years, it's probably not urgent, but if it is still important, they will come back to you and say, hang on, this ticket's important, and you can have a conversation. Sorry, just need a sip of water. All right. Now, let's go back to step functions and look at how we can use them in our flow. So here we have an example of a user being added to a GitHub organization. Now, in an enterprise GitHub organization, you can have verified domains for emails. Those emails don't have to be public, but when the user is added to the organization, you can verify that they have an email address that is verified against the organization. That allows you to be in contact with that user if there's ever a problem with their activity. So what we do here, we use a GraphQL API call out to GitHub using the first step to enrich the user data. Now, that GraphQL client I'll be releasing in the next month or two, hopefully. Then we invoke the Lambda function, which is actually under the hood using Open Policy Agent. In the next couple of days, I will be doing a release of a Lambda function that allows you to do Open Policy Agent checks where it's pulling policies from an S3 bucket, so completely serverless Open Policy Agent verification. And I think Andrilla from a team I used to work with is somewhere in the audience, right there, with her hand up. She actually helped me work on that. So that code will be going out in the next couple of days. Sorry, hang on. Hashtag not COVID. So then we do the check. If the email is not present, we rip the user out. And that's just using an open API call using the REST API back to GitHub. Then we get the email for the sender, again using GraphQL, and then we send an email to the person who added them, telling them that they shouldn't have added the person because they didn't have a verified email address. Quick thing on notifications, if you have access to organizational data, every time you notify an engineer that they have done something wrong, CC their manager. And the reason for that is engineers are lazy and they love problem solving. Now, if they're getting notifications about stuff, they're more likely to get rid of the notifications by hiding them than going and fixing the underlying problem using this great bit of technology called mail filters. Whereas managers, they're also lazy but not quite so good at problem solving. They're just going to start getting an inbox full of notifications and they're going to start reading them going, hey, so-and-so, why do I keep getting notifications about you doing this bad thing? Oh, just let me fix it. And the problem gets solved far faster. So CCing managers is a good thing. Also, towards the end in this workflow, we're going to emit an event. It's always nice to emit events so you can do further reactions. Okay, another example. This one is hooked up to Zendesk because we pay them enough money. And what we do is we are getting a comment on a Zendesk ticket. As part of that comment, we are doing the check to see if there are any Jira ticket references. If there are, we're going to go through and update every single one of those Jira tickets with a link. So when you go into the Jira ticket, you can see the reference back to the Zendesk ticket, because in 3 months' time, when you're going through Git history, something's broken in production, you can actually see that there was problems with this code in the past. So it's just really nice to be able to link those up, and you can do it without any user involvement. Another one, this is hooked up to GitHub again. First check we're going to do, does the pull request have a reference to a Jira ticket? If it doesn't, we should be sending out an email to the developer and their manager telling them that they need to reference Jira tickets. If that passes, then we're going to see how many commits they actually have in their pull request. I've chosen 5 as the maximum number. Now, I'm sure there's a few of you going, oh, Dave, don't you know there's a squash commit functionality in GitHub? There is. The problem with that is that you're just squashing everything together. You're not making sure that the work is properly organised. Making engineers organise their work properly means they're actually thinking about their work and making sure that they've got proper units of work as separate commits. So don't use the squash functionality. It's a shortcut that causes you problems later because you end up with a 2,500 line diff and no way of knowing exactly what's in it. So with this one, if it fails, what we're going to do is add a comment. We can also fail the pull request if we want to, so they have to go through and make that change. Again, emit events when we're done. So this is all about understanding the things that cause us problems, having our whole collection of Lambda functions that we can call to perform remediations or notifications, and using step functions to wire it all up. So when you're building your platform, reduce the amount of code you're writing yourself. Try to generate it where you can. Reuse stuff as much as possible. And instead of recycling, if you've got really big Lambda functions, refactor them down into smaller ones. And that will allow better use of that code in step functions and elsewhere. Now, proactive ops, it's a mindset. This isn't something that you can go into the office on Monday and go, we're going to be proactive. And then on Tuesday, you're like, tick the box, we're now proactive, job done. You know, it's the same with Agile. Some people think you can do that. Same with DevOps. It's a mindset thing. It's a team culture thing. You need to be thinking about this stuff talking about it within your team. Like if you're ripping users out of GitHub, that's great, but then you're going to have people going to their manager going, I can't do my job because I don't have access to GitHub, rather than I can't do my job because I'm too lazy to add the email address to my GitHub profile. So you have to shape the narrative as well. Okay, if you're new to a lot of this stuff, serverlessland.com is great. Loads of resources from Amazon on event-driven architectures. They'll help you understand Lambda, step functions, event bridge, all of that stuff. Go check it out. I'll wait a few seconds for people to grab the QR code. I think most of the phone, now a whole bunch more have just come up. I was like, cool, we're ready to move on. I'll grab a sip of water. Okay, so let's, I'm happy to take questions from people. While we're doing questions, I have a newsletter, proactiveops.io. I publish infrequently, but I will be doing code drops over the next little while. So if you want to be some of the first people to get access to code, sign up for the newsletter. If you do subscribe today, I have stickers in my backpack. You get a sticker if you subscribe. Bribery is a great thing. So, any questions? Just wait for the mic to get down there. Now it looks like I've seated the crowd with friends to ask questions.
No, that's not the case. This is a tough one. So proactiveness or proactive mindset takes foresight as well. How do you get foresight of organization?
So you develop foresight over time. Initially, when you start, you have to look back at your recent incidents and understand what are the things that actually cause you problems and start putting things in place that catch those things. And over time, the team will get better. Like when you start having near misses, you can go, we almost had a problem here. If we had have had this workflow in place, it would have helped us with it.
Sometimes it's difficult to, not take a lot of data-driven decisions because the team is still maturing. How do you plan for some proactiveness with less experience at hand?
Yeah, so I think that in order to make this work, you start small. Pick little things, like get a bunch of people together in front of a whiteboard and start talking about some of the things that you have had problems with, and just start going, well, if we could stop this, then it'll stop this bigger thing. And it's really about collaboration and having a lot of people's input. It shouldn't just be like the senior architect in the corner working on this stuff by themselves. It has to involve everyone. Yep. Oh, hang on, the mic guy's going the other way. We'll come back to you, sorry. Yep, we'll go there.
Yeah, hi Dave. Thanks for the great talk. So the question is, the kind of philosophy of push left, if you can hear me.
Yep.
Because you use Python, so we have pre-commit hooks inbuilt already inside the Python ecosystem. So where do you think that sort of mechanisms or solutions can help alleviate this problem rather than relying and building something on serverless mechanisms? And also, an additional question is, there's already ways that AI or let's say machine learning is giving you the additional support on writing a good GitHub comments or commit messages. And do you see space for machine learning to play a good role in this?
Yeah, machine learning definitely has a role to play in all of this. In an earlier iteration of this talk, I used to have an example of doing sentiment analysis on comments on Zendesk tickets and doing a lookup in the org chart. And if someone was important enough in the org chart, that if there was negative sentiment on a ticket, you could just bump the priority on it automatically. There is a lot of other options, so I'm going to wrap things up now. If you want to talk more, I'll be outside in the next break. Thanks, everyone.